I'll be 10 minutes late. That was the last message Ethan Hayes received before his blind date blocked his number. He stared at the empty seat across from him and couldn't help laughing. So, I've been stood up. The waiter gave him a sympathetic smile. Would you like to order anyway, sir? Ethan nodded. One steak. He glanced at the untouched second menu. Actually, just one. 3 years in the city. 3 years working 80-hour weeks. 3 years secretly in love with someone he had absolutely no business loving. His CEO, Sophia Lancaster. Beautiful, brilliant, impossible. She was everything the financial magazines adored. Cold enough to make billionaires nervous. Sharp enough to destroy competitors with a single sentence. Meanwhile, Ethan was simply the executive assistant who knew exactly how she liked her coffee. Black, 1 cube of ice, never stirred. He knew her schedule better than she did. He knew she forgot to eat whenever she negotiated acquisitions. He knew she secretly loved strawberry cake even though she always claimed desserts were a waste of calories. What he didn't know was why she had suddenly approved his vacation request. Go. That was all she'd said. Enjoy your blind date. He had waited for her to look up. She never did. So here he was eating dinner alone. His phone vibrated. Mom, did she arrive? Ethan sighed. Ethan, looks like fate has other plans. His mother immediately replied. Good, he frowned. Before he could ask what she meant, the restaurant doors opened. A cold evening breeze drifted inside. Every conversation in the restaurant gradually faded. Not because of a celebrity, not because of a politician, because a woman wearing an elegant ivory coat walked in as though she owned the room. Sophia Lancaster, his CEO, she wasn't alone. Behind her walked Mia. The company secretary, 2 lawyers, 1 elderly gentleman carrying a velvet box, and 6 security guards. The restaurant manager nearly ran over. Ms. Lancaster. We weren't informed you would come. Sophia raised one finger. I'm looking for someone. Her eyes swept across the restaurant, then landed on Ethan. She walked straight toward him. Every customer turned to watch. Ethan stood so quickly that his chair almost tipped over. Ms. Lancaster. She stopped beside his table, looked at the empty chair across from him. So, you really came. He blinked. Yes, you dressed nicely. Thank you. You even brought flowers. He looked awkwardly at the bouquet he'd intended to give his blind date. Sophia looked at the untouched second-place setting, then calmly sat down in the empty chair. The entire restaurant fell silent. Ethan stared. Ms. Lancaster? She looked at the waiter. Another steak. Medium rare. She turned back toward Ethan. You don't mind? It wasn't a question. He sat down slowly. What are you doing here? I heard you had a blind date. You approved my leave. I did. So, I wanted to see. See what? She looked him straight in the eye. If she'd be worthy of you. Ethan laughed nervously. You flew across the city to interview my blind date. I did. Why? Before Sophia answered, the elderly gentleman behind her stepped forward. He placed a small velvet box on the table, then respectfully stepped back. Ethan frowned. What's that? Sophia opened it. Inside lay 2 platinum wedding rings. The restaurant gasped. Ethan forgot how to breathe. What? She looked completely calm. I bought them yesterday. His mind went blank. You are going to marry someone? Yes. His heart sank. Then Sophia continued, if your blind date was a good woman, I plan to congratulate you. She gently touched one of the rings. If she wasn't, she looked back at him. I plan to ask you something. He swallowed. What? She smiled. The faintest smile, the kind only Ethan had seen during late-night overtime. Ethan Hayes, you've worked beside me for 3 years. You remember every meeting, every medicine, every deadline. You know exactly how I like my coffee. He smiled weakly. Occupational habit. She shook her head. No, it was love. His heart stopped. I pretended not to notice. She laughed quietly because I was afraid. Afraid? If I admitted it, you might disappear. He stared at her. She slowly pushed the velvet box across the table. So today, I decided to stop pretending. The entire restaurant remained utterly silent. Even the waiters had forgotten to move. Sophia looked at the empty chair that should have belonged to Ethan's blind date, then back at him. I came holding 2 wedding rings. She tilted her head slightly. I'd rather not take them home. Ethan's heartbeat echoed in his ears. Sophia? She interrupted softly. So, let me ask before someone else does. She opened the ring box completely. Would you rather have a blind date or a lifetime with me? Outside the restaurant windows, snow began to fall. Inside, every pair of eyes was fixed on Ethan. And for the first time in 3 years, the Ice Queen's CEO looked nervous, waiting for only one man's answer. The restaurant remained completely silent. Every customer was pretending not to watch. Every customer was watching. Ethan looked from Sophia to the 2 wedding rings, then back to her. His voice came out almost as a whisper. You're serious? Sophia answered immediately. I've never been more serious. He laughed nervously. You know, this feels like a dream. She leaned back slightly. If it is, I hope you don't wake up. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan saw the famous Ice Queen CEO look genuinely anxious. Not because of a billion-dollar deal. Not because of shareholders. Because of him. He slowly reached toward the velvet box. Sophia's breathing unconsciously slowed. His fingertips brushed one of the rings. Then he closed the box again. Sophia's smile faded almost imperceptibly. I need to ask one question. She nodded. Anything? He looked directly into her eyes. Why today? You had 3 years. You could have said something at any time. Why wait until my blind date? Sophia lowered her gaze. A helpless smile appeared on her lips. Because I thought I still had time. She quietly stirred the untouched coffee in front of her. I've always believed. If 2 people were meant for each other, they'd eventually find the right moment. She looked up. I was wrong. Ethan listened quietly. The morning your vacation request reached my desk. I almost rejected it. You did? She nodded. I wanted to ask why, but then I saw the note. What note? Blind date arranged by family. She smiled bitterly. I told myself, it's just dinner. Nothing will happen. She laughed softly. Then I imagined another possibility. Ethan waited. What if she made you laugh? What if she remembered your birthday? What if she made you coffee every morning? What if you fell in love? She stopped speaking. For several seconds, she simply looked at her own hands. I couldn't finish signing the approval. Ethan asked quietly. So, what changed? Sophia looked straight at him. I became jealous. Ethan blinked. You, the CEO everyone is afraid of? She nodded. Honestly, I hated imagining another woman sitting where I'm sitting now. She looked at the empty chair. I hated imagining you smiling at someone else. I hated imagining someone else learning your coffee order. Someone at the next table accidentally dropped a fork. Neither of them noticed. Sophia continued, so I called Mia. Across the restaurant, Mia immediately looked guilty. Ethan slowly turned toward her. Mia. She smiled awkwardly and gave a tiny wave. Sorry. Sophia continued calmly. I asked her to investigate your blind date. Ethan rubbed his forehead. You investigated her? I did. And Sophia sighed. She accepted another date. What? At the same restaurant, same evening. 1 hour earlier. Ethan froze. So, Sophia nodded. She was never coming. Silence. Then Ethan suddenly understood the message. I'll be 10 minutes late. It wasn't true. No. Sophia smiled faintly. She had already left with someone else. For a moment, Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or feel relieved. So, I really was abandoned. You were? And you knew. I did. He looked at her. How long? She answered honestly. 27 minutes. He stared. You let me sit here alone for 27 minutes. I wanted to. Why? She looked almost embarrassed. Because I wanted to know what if you'd still wait. He couldn't help laughing. That's a terrible test. I know. I hate it every minute. So, why didn't you come sooner? She looked into his eyes. Because I was afraid. Afraid I'd arrive. And you'd smile at someone else the way you smile at me. His heart softened instantly. Dinner finally arrived. Neither of them touched it immediately. Sophia picked up her knife, then quietly put it back down. I don't have much experience with this. With what? Confessing. I usually negotiate mergers, not feelings. He smiled. I noticed. She looked at him cautiously. So, am I doing terribly? He laughed a little. Her shoulders dropped. I knew it. You brought lawyers. They're leaving. You brought security. They're leaving, too. You brought wedding rings. Those are staying. He laughed even harder for the first time that evening. Sophia relaxed then. She pointed at him. That smile. What about it? I crossed half the city for it. After dinner, snow covered the sidewalks outside. The city lights reflected off the white streets. Sophia and Ethan walked out together. Neither of them opened an umbrella. Snowflakes landed softly on Sophia's dark hair. Without thinking, Ethan reached over and brushed them away. She stopped walking. What? You'll catch a cold. She looked at him quietly. There you go again. What? Taking care of me before you've even answered. He smiled helplessly. I don't think I'll ever stop. She stepped one pace closer, close enough to see her own reflection in his eyes. Good, because I don't want you to. A cold breeze passed between them. Sophia slowly reached into her coat pocket. This time, she didn't take out the ring box. She took out a folded piece of paper. It had become slightly worn around the edges. She handed it to Ethan. He unfolded it carefully. His eyes widened. It was his employment contract signed exactly 3 years ago. Across the bottom corner in tiny handwriting was a sentence he had never noticed, written in blue ink. I hope he stays for a long time. Ethan looked up in disbelief. You wrote this? Sophia nodded. The day I hired you. You? She smiled shyly. I liked you before your first day at work. His heartbeat stopped. You knew me before the interview. I did. She took a slow breath, then smiled in that mysterious way that promised another secret. Because I've actually been looking for you much longer than 3 years. Snow continued falling around them. Ethan looked at the woman standing before him. The CEO he thought he had secretly loved for 3 years. The woman who had apparently been searching for him even longer. He smiled. I think you owe me a very long story. Sophia slipped her hand into his. I do, and I plan to tell you for the rest of our lives. Snow continued falling around them. Neither Ethan nor Sophia noticed. They stood on the quiet sidewalk, their joined hands tucked inside the pocket of Sophia's coat to keep warm. Ethan looked at the old employment contract once again. The blue handwriting was unmistakably hers. I hope he stays for a long time. He looked up. You knew me before my interview. Sophia nodded. I did. How? She smiled. I'll show you. Instead of driving home, Sophia turned the car toward the old part of the city. 20 minutes later, they stopped in front of a small neighborhood library. It was already closed for the night. Only the lights outside the entrance remained on. Ethan frowned. This place. It looks familiar. Sophia laughed softly. It should. You used to come here every Saturday. He looked at her in surprise. You know that, too? I know. She reached into her handbag. Instead of taking out business documents, she produced a faded library card. Its edges had become soft with age. She handed it to him. He looked down. The name printed across the front made him freeze. Sophia Lancaster. The borrowing history inside was almost 10 years old. Then he noticed something else. One page had been folded carefully. Inside was an old receipt, a coffee receipt from the tiny cafe across the street. Ethan's eyes widened. I remember this cafe. You should. She smiled. You paid for my coffee. His memories slowly returned. 10 years earlier, he had been a university student, working part-time, studying during the day, working at night. One rainy Saturday, he had noticed a young woman searching desperately through her bag. She had forgotten her wallet. The embarrassed college girl had quietly apologized to the cashier. Before she could leave, someone had placed enough money on the counter. It's just coffee. Don't worry. She had looked up, but the young man was already carrying his own cup toward the window. He never looked back. Sophia watched Ethan's expression change. You remember? He laughed in disbelief. I thought that was a stranger. I was. I never even saw your face. You didn't? She looked down at the receipt, but I saw yours. They walked slowly toward the little cafe. The owner was older now, gray-haired, still cheerful. The moment he saw Sophia, he smiled. "Miss Lancaster. You finally brought him." Ethan stopped walking. "Finally." The owner nodded. "You've been asking about him for years." Ethan slowly turned towards Sophia. "You came back here many times. Why?" She smiled helplessly. "Because I only knew one thing about you. You like this cafe?" The owner laughed. Every month she'd ask me, "Has the young man who paid for my coffee come back?" I always had to disappoint her. Sophia looked slightly embarrassed. I may have been a little persistent. "A little?" The owner chuckled. "You nearly convinced me to put up a missing person poster." Ethan couldn't stop smiling. "So, the first time we met, you remembered me." "I never forgot." "And the interview," she nodded. "I recognized your name immediately, but I wasn't sure. So, I secretly attended the final interviews." He blinked. "You interviewed me yourself?" From behind the one-way glass, and afterward, she laughed. "I pretended not to know you." They found a small table by the window, exactly where Ethan had sat years ago. The cafe owner quietly placed 2 cups of coffee in front of them. No charge for old memories. After he walked away, Ethan looked at Sophia. "So, you hired me because I bought you coffee?" She shook her head. "No, I hired you because of what happened after." He frowned. "After you left, you forgot your umbrella." "I remember." "You walked back." He thought for a moment, then smiled. "There was an elderly couple." She nodded. "They had no umbrella, so I gave them mine." "You walked home in the rain." She looked into his eyes. I realized something. "What?" "You were the kind of man who always made sure everyone else got home safely." She laughed quietly. "And I wanted someone like that beside me." His heart warmed. "You've carried that memory for 10 years. So have you." I barely remembered it. "That's because kindness is ordinary for you." She reached across the table. Her fingers found his naturally. "But for the person receiving it, it can change everything." The snow outside grew heavier. The little cafe became warmer, comfortable, peaceful. Ethan suddenly asked, "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" "That we had already met." She smiled. "I wanted you to choose me. Not because I was the girl from the cafe, not because I was your CEO, but because," she lowered her eyes, "you genuinely fell in love with me." He laughed softly. "You made things very difficult." "I know. You almost lost me." "I know." She squeezed his hand. "I'm done making things difficult." As they left the cafe, the owner called after them. "Young man." Ethan turned. The old man grinned. "You owe me 10 years of curiosity." Ethan laughed. "I suppose I do." The owner pointed at Sophia. "Take good care of her." Ethan looked at the woman standing beside him. The woman who had spent 10 years quietly searching for the stranger who bought her coffee. He smiled with complete certainty. "I've been trying since the day I met her." Sophia looked at him. "You didn't know it then?" He wrapped his scarf gently around her neck. "No, but I know it now." She looked up at the falling snow, then back at him. "What are you thinking?" He intertwined his fingers with hers. "I'm thinking, our first date happened 10 years ago." She laughed. "And our second one?" He looked around the little street glowing beneath the snow. He smiled. "I think it's happening right now." They walked away together, leaving 2 sets of footprints side by side in the fresh snow. Neither of them noticed the cafe owner watching through the window with a satisfied smile. Some love stories begin with fireworks. Theirs had begun with a single cup of coffee, and neither of them would ever drink it alone again. Monday morning, Whitmore Group had never been so noisy. Employees who usually hurried through the lobby suddenly walked much slower. Coffee in hand, phones hidden behind folders, eyes secretly fixed on the revolving doors. One question echoed through every department. Was it true? Had their legendary Ice Queen CEO really fallen in love with her former assistant? At exactly 8:30 a.m., a black Bentley stopped outside the building. The driver's door opened first. Ethan stepped out. He wore a charcoal gray suit Sophia had secretly ordered for him 2 days earlier. Simple, elegant, perfectly tailored. He walked around the car and opened the passenger door. Sophia stepped out the moment she saw him waiting with one hand extended. She smiled. Not the polite smile reserved for investors. Not the distant smile seen in interviews. A real one warm enough to make several employees forget they were supposed to be working. She naturally slipped her hand into his. Morning. Morning. Did you sleep well? Not really. He frowned immediately. Nightmares? She shook her head. I kept thinking about what? She looked at him with a helpless smile. I kept worrying I'd wake up and discover yesterday wasn't real. He gently squeezed her hand. It was, I know, but I still checked. He laughed softly. You checked what? My ring. She lifted her left hand. The platinum ring caught the morning sunlight. I've looked at it at least 20 times. Ethan smiled. I've done the same. The lobby fell completely silent as they walked inside together. No one greeted them. Not because they were afraid, because they were stunned. After 3 years of watching Sophia Lancaster walk into the building alone, seeing her slow down to match someone else's pace felt almost unreal. Finally, one young intern gathered enough courage. Good morning, Ms. Lancaster. Sophia nodded. Good morning. Then she added calmly. And good morning to my fiancé. The intern immediately looked at Ethan. Good morning, Mr. Hayes. Ethan smiled politely. Good morning. Only after the elevator doors closed did the lobby explode. Did you hear that? She introduced him first. I've worked here 5 years. I've never heard CEO sound that gentle. Inside the private elevator, Ethan let out a small laugh. You started frightening people. I've always frightened people. You become worse. She tilted her head. Because I held your hand. No, because you sounded proud. She looked genuinely confused. I was. He blinked. Proud. My fiancé is kind. He works harder than anyone. He remembers everyone's birthday. He deserves to be introduced proudly. Ethan looked away for a second. Nobody had ever spoken about him that way. Certainly not in public. He reached for her hand again. This time, not because she had offered it, because he wanted to hold it. At 9 o'clock, the executive board meeting began. The directors rose as Sophia entered. Ethan intended to take his old place behind her chair. Before he could, Sophia stopped walking. No. He looked up. What? She gently pulled the chair beside hers away from the table. Sit here. The directors exchanged glances. Ethan lowered his voice. This seat belongs to the vice chairman. Not anymore. What? I moved him. Why? She answered as though it were obvious. Because that's where my partner sits. The vice chairman laughed first. I don't mind. He stood, picked up his documents, and moved farther down the table. I've waited 3 years for her to smile. He grinned at Ethan. I'm not ruining this. The room filled with warm laughter. Ethan finally sat down. For the first time, not behind Sophia, beside her. Halfway through the meeting, an investment proposal sparked debate. One director argued aggressively. I don't believe this acquisition is worth the risk. Another disagreed. Voices gradually grew louder. Sophia remained silent. She turned slightly. What do you think? The room instantly became quiet. Every director looked toward Ethan. He hesitated. I don't want people thinking I'm influencing the board. Sophia smiled. I asked for your opinion, not your permission. He looked through the proposal carefully, then spoke calmly. The numbers work, but the people don't. Everyone frowned. He continued, the company has good technology, but high executive turnover. They don't trust each other. You can't build a successful merger if the people running it already want to leave. Silence. The vice chairman slowly nodded. He's right. Another director added. I completely missed that. Sophia never looked away from Ethan. I didn't. She closed the folder. We're declining the acquisition. No hesitation. No further discussion. After the meeting ended, one senior director approached Ethan. I've worked with Sophia for 8 years. Ethan smiled politely. And the director laughed. I'd never seen her trust anyone's judgment more than yours. That afternoon, Sophia had 3 television interviews. The makeup artist adjusted her hair while Ethan reviewed tomorrow's schedule. Suddenly, the stylist smiled. Ms. Lancaster. You've changed. Sophia looked into the mirror. Oh. You smiled before every interview now. The room became quiet. The stylist continued. Before you look successful, she glanced toward Ethan. Now you look happy. Sophia met Ethan's eyes through the mirror for several long seconds. Neither looked away. Finally, she smiled. I am. The last interview ended close to sunset. The rooftop terrace above the headquarters was empty except for the two of them. The city glowed beneath the evening sky. Sophia rested her elbows against the railing. Tired? A little. You had 6 interviews. I know. He handed her a paper cup. She looked inside. Hot chocolate, not coffee. You remembered. You only drink hot chocolate after stressful days. She accepted it with a smile. You really do remember everything. He leaned beside her. I always will. For a while, they watched the sunset together. Then Sophia asked quietly. Ethan, if I hadn't walked into that restaurant. He answered before she finished. I would have spent my whole life pretending to forget you. She looked at him. And you? He smiled. What if your blind date had shown up? He laughed. Then I'd have had dinner and I would have gone home and I would have kept comparing every smile to yours. Sophia's eyes grew warm. So there was never any competition. There never could be. She rested her head lightly against his shoulder. The wind was cool. His shoulder was warm. So tell me one more thing. What? When people ask who you work for. He smiled. I'll tell them the truth. She looked up curiously. And what's that? He gently intertwined his fingers with hers. I don't work for the CEO anymore. I work beside the woman I love. For the first time that day, Sophia forgot about the cameras, the interviews, the company. She simply stood on the rooftop with the man she had searched for over 10 years. The city buzzed beneath them. The future stretched before them, and neither of them had any intention of letting go. By December, everyone at Whitmore Group had accepted one undeniable truth. Their CEO had changed. Not in the boardroom. She was still sharp, still decisive, still capable of making billion-dollar decisions in under 10 minutes. But the moment Ethan appeared, she became someone else. Someone who smiled, someone who laughed, someone who occasionally forgot she was the CEO at all. The employees even had a private nickname for her, Mrs. Softheart. No one dared say it to her face. Everyone secretly agreed. One Thursday afternoon, Ethan flew to Boston for a 2-day conference. It was the first business trip he had taken alone since they got engaged. Sophia insisted she was perfectly fine. I'll survive 48 hours. Ethan smiled. I'll call you. You don't have to. I want to. She looked away to hide her smile. I'll answer. The first day went smoothly. Morning. One message. Have you had breakfast? Lunch. Another. Remember to drink water. Night. A photo. Sophia had taken a picture of the dinner she almost forgot to eat. She added only 4 words. I finished everything. Ethan laughed. For anyone else, it would have been an ordinary photo. For him, it was proof that she had remembered to take care of herself. Back at Whitmore Group, however, Sophia was having a terrible day. 3 meetings, 1 lawsuit, an emergency shareholder conference. By 8 in the evening, she still hadn't left her office. Mia knocked gently. Ms. Lancaster. Mr. Hayes asked me to remind you. Sophia looked up. Remind me what? Mia held up a lunchbox. He said, if she's still working after 8, make sure she eats this. Sophia opened the lid. Inside was homemade tomato pasta. Still warm. A small yellow sticky note rested on top. His handwriting was neat. Don't negotiate with your stomach. You'll lose Ethan. She laughed out loud. The sound startled Mia. You know, Sophia whispered while looking at the note. I think he believes I'm 5 years old. Mia smiled. No, he believes you're terrible at taking care of yourself. Sophia couldn't argue because he was right. The conference ended earlier than expected. Ethan immediately booked the first evening flight home. He didn't tell Sophia. He wanted to surprise her. The plane landed just after 9. Snow covered the airport runway. As soon as he turned on his phone, several missed calls appeared from Mia. His smile disappeared. He called back immediately. Mia. Mr. Hayes. What's wrong? CEO collapsed. His heart stopped. What? She didn't eat all day. She insisted she was fine. Then she fainted during the board meeting. Ethan was already running toward the exit. Which hospital? No hospital. What? She refused, she said. Mia hesitated. Take me home. 20 minutes later, Ethan pushed open the apartment door. The living room lights were dim. Sophia lay asleep on the sofa. A blanket covered her. Medical documents rested on the coffee table. She looked exhausted, much smaller than the woman who commanded boardrooms. Mia stood quietly. The doctor came. Low blood sugar, stress, and lack of sleep. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. I was gone for 1 day. That's enough. Mia smiled helplessly for her. I'll take care of her. I know. Mia picked up her bag. She only fell asleep 20 minutes ago. After the door closed, silence filled the apartment. Ethan slowly walked toward the sofa. A strand of Sophia's hair had fallen across her face. He gently brushed it away. She stirred, then slowly opened her eyes. For a moment, she looked confused. Ethan? He smiled softly. I'm home. She blinked several times. I thought you were coming back tomorrow. I came back early. Why? I missed you. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Sophia stared at him, then smiled weakly. You finally said it. He laughed quietly. I guess I did. She slowly sat up. I'm sorry. For what? I promised I'd eat. I didn't. He sat beside her. You scared me. She lowered her head. I know. He took both her hands gently. They told me you refused to go to the hospital. She whispered. I wanted to come home. Why? She looked into his eyes. Because home is where you are. For a long second, Ethan couldn't speak. Then he stood without warning. He slipped one arm beneath her knees, the other behind her back. Sophia gasped softly. Ethan? He lifted her effortlessly into his arms. The famous CEO instinctively wrapped her arms around his neck. What are you doing? Taking you to bed. I can walk. I know, but you don't have to. She rested her forehead lightly against his shoulder. The apartment was quiet. Only the soft sound of snow tapping against the windows accompanied them. He carried her all the way to the bedroom, set her down carefully, pulled the blanket over her, then turned toward the door. I'll make soup. Before he could leave, Sophia caught his hand. He looked back. She didn't let go. Stay. I'll only be 10 minutes. She shook her head. No, I don't mean the soup. I mean, her fingers tightened around his. Stay with me. His heart softened instantly. He sat back down on the edge of the bed. Without another word, she leaned gently against him, closing her eyes. I don't need meetings tonight. I don't need contracts. I don't need another promotion. She smiled sleepily. I just need my fiancé. Ethan kissed the top of her head. You have him always. Always. Outside, the snow continued to fall across the sleeping city. Inside the warm bedroom, the most powerful woman in the city slept peacefully in the arms of the only man who had ever made her feel she didn't have to be strong all the time. Sophia didn't return to work for 3 days. Not because the doctor insisted. Because Ethan did. The company survived before me. It'll survive 3 days without you. She crossed her arms. I'm the CEO. He nodded. And you're also the woman who fainted because she skipped 3 meals. No meetings, no laptop, no negotiations. She sighed dramatically. You're becoming very strict. He smiled. I'm learning from the best. For the next 3 days, the apartment became quieter than ever. They cooked breakfast together, watched old movies at night, played chess while snow fell outside the windows. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they simply sat on the sofa reading different books with their shoulders touching. To Ethan, it felt strangely luxurious. Not because of the apartment, not because of Sophia, because for the first time in years, neither of them was in a hurry. On the 4th morning, Sophia walked into the kitchen wearing one of Ethan's sweaters. He was making pancakes. The smell of butter filled the room. She wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. Good morning. He flipped another pancake. Morning. I've been thinking. That usually means trouble. She laughed. My grandfather invited us to dinner tonight. Ethan stopped flipping the pancake. Dinner? She nodded. He wants to meet you. I've already met him. As my assistant, she rested her chin lightly against his shoulder. This time as family. That evening, the Whitmore estate was unusually lively. Long dining tables, crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers. Almost every member of the Whitmore family had returned. The moment Ethan entered beside Sophia, conversation quietly faded. Some relatives looked curious. Others looked skeptical. One elderly aunt whispered, "So that's him. He looks ordinary." Another replied, "Ms. Lancaster must really love him." Chairman Henry Whitmore heard every word. He calmly placed his teacup down. "My granddaughter has excellent judgment." The room became silent. No one spoke again. Dinner began peacefully until one of Sophia's cousins smiled politely. "Mr. Hayes." Ethan looked up. "You worked as Sophia's assistant." "I did." "It must feel strange." "In what way?" "Marrying someone so far above your social status." Sophia's expression cooled immediately before she could answer. Ethan gently touched her hand beneath the table. He smiled at the cousin. It felt strange. The cousin smiled confidently. "I thought so." Ethan nodded. "Because I spent years wondering why someone as extraordinary as Sophia chose me." The room grew quiet. He looked towards Sophia, but eventually I stopped asking that question. The cousin frowned. "Why?" Ethan smiled. "Because every morning she chooses me again. So now my only job is to deserve that choice." Sophia looked at him with eyes full of quiet pride. Chairman Whitmore smiled into his tea. After dinner, everyone gathered in the conservatory. Snow drifted outside the glass walls. The old chairman beckoned Ethan over. "Walk with me." They stepped into the winter garden. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, the chairman asked, "Do you know why I opposed this relationship at first?" Ethan answered honestly. "Because I'm not from a wealthy family." The old man shook his head. "No, you think too little of yourself." Ethan looked surprised. "I opposed it because Sophia has never relied on anyone. I was afraid she'd marry a man who relied only on her." He stopped walking, then looked directly at Ethan. "But after watching you these past months, I've realized something." Ethan waited quietly. "You don't stand behind her. You don't stand in front of her. You walk beside her." The chairman smiled warmly. "And that's exactly where she needs you." For the first time since meeting him, the old man extended his hand. "Welcome to the family, Ethan." Ethan shook it firmly. "Thank you." "No." The chairman laughed softly. "Thank you for teaching my granddaughter how to smile again." When they returned inside, Sophia immediately walked over. "What did Grandpa say?" The chairman answered before Ethan could. "I approve the wedding." Sophia blinked. "Just like that. I've waited long enough." He smiled. "So have the two of you." The room filled with gentle laughter. On the drive home, snowflakes danced beneath the headlights. Sophia quietly looked out the window. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked. She smiled. "I spent years trying to prove I could carry everything by myself." And now, she turned toward him. "Now I think it's much nicer carrying life with someone else." He reached across the center console. She placed her hand in his immediately. "You know," he said softly, "I've been planning something." "Oh, you already proposed." "I know. So, what are you planning?" He smiled mysteriously. "A proper proposal?" She laughed. "We're already engaged." "I know. So why?" He glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the snowy road. "Because every important promise deserves its own memory." She squeezed his hand. "I'll pretend I don't know what's coming." He laughed. "And I'll pretend I believe you." Outside, the city lights shimmered against the fresh snow. Inside the car, two hands remained intertwined, neither willing to let go because somewhere between business meetings, coffee cups, and quiet evenings at home, they had discovered something far more valuable than success. They had found the person they wanted to come home to. The first signs appeared 2 weeks later. Sophia noticed Ethan checking his phone more often, closing browser tabs whenever she walked into the room, taking mysterious phone calls on the balcony. Even Mia suddenly became terrible at lying. "Where's Ethan?" Mia looked at the ceiling as if the answer were written there. "Coffee." Sophia narrowed her eyes. "A suit bag. Fancy coffee." Sophia couldn't help laughing. "You two are plotting something." Mia immediately shook her head. "Absolutely not." Her guilty expression answered the question anyway. 3 days later. Ethan came home unusually late. Sophia was curled up on the sofa reading. The moment she heard the door, she looked up. "You're home. I'm sorry. You missed dinner." "I know." He sat beside her. "You could have called." "I wanted to." "So why didn't you?" He smiled apologetically. "I was afraid I'd accidentally tell you everything." She closed her book. "So there is a secret." "There is." She leaned closer. "Give me one hint." He thought for a moment. "It started 10 years ago." Her heart skipped. "The cafe." He laughed. "That was too easy." She smiled proudly. "I know you. I know. And that's exactly why this is difficult." The following Saturday, Ethan asked Sophia to keep the evening free. No work, no meetings, no phone. She looked suspicious. "Should I be worried?" "A little." "Will I need high heels?" "No." "A formal dress?" "No." "Then what should I wear?" He smiled. "Something comfortable." She looked even more confused. At 6 o'clock, Ethan parked outside a familiar little street. Sophia recognized it immediately. The cafe. He nodded. "It's changed." The old sign had been restored. Warm lights glowed through the windows. Snow rested gently on the roof. The owner stood at the entrance, waiting. The moment he saw them, he grinned. "I've kept your reservation." Sophia looked surprised. "Our reservation?" The owner winked at Ethan. "For 10 years?" She looked from one man to the other. "What?" Inside. Everything looked almost exactly the same. The little wooden tables, the bookshelves, the smell of fresh coffee. Only one thing had changed. Every table was empty. Candles flickered softly. A string quartet played quietly near the fireplace. Sophia looked around. "You rented the whole cafe?" Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "Maybe you hate spending money." "I made an exception." The cafe owner walked over carrying 2 mugs. He placed them down. "No charge." "As promised." Sophia looked confused. "What promise?" The owner smiled. 10 years ago. This young man paid for your coffee." She nodded. "I remember. He came back last month. He asked if I'd help him repay the favor." Her eyes slowly widened. Ethan reached into his coat pocket. Instead of taking out a ring, he placed something on the table. A receipt, the same faded coffee receipt from 10 years earlier. Sophia stared at it. "You kept it?" He smiled. "No, you did. I borrowed it." She laughed, forming tears. "You planned all this for months?" He nodded. "I wanted to." He looked around the cafe. "I've been thinking about something." "What?" 10 years ago, I bought 1 cup of coffee. You gave me something much bigger." She whispered. "What? A future?" She blinked. "I didn't even know your name." "I know, but you changed mine." He laughed softly. "Before meeting you, I thought success meant working harder than everyone else. Then I met you, and suddenly I wanted someone to come home to." The room became completely silent. Even the musicians stopped playing. Only snow drifted gently beyond the windows. Ethan stood, walked around the table, then slowly knelt on one knee. Sophia's eyes filled immediately. "Ethan." He smiled nervously. "You already proposed once. You beat me to it." She laughed through tears. "I couldn't wait." "I know." But he reached into his pocket. This time he revealed a small velvet box. Inside lay another pair of rings, simple, elegant, engraved on the inside. One read, "You found me." The other, "I was looking." Sophia covered her mouth, unable to speak. He took a slow breath. "I've practiced this speech 27 times. She laughed. "I can tell. I forgot half of it." "You did, so I'll just tell the truth." He looked directly into her eyes. "I don't remember every business meeting. I don't remember every contract. I don't remember every promotion. But I'll remember the day you walked into a restaurant carrying 2 wedding rings. The day you chose me, every ordinary breakfast, every coffee, every snowfall for the rest of my life." A tear rolled down Sophia's cheek. He smiled. "So this time, let me ask." He opened the ring box completely. "Sophia Lancaster, my first accidental date, my favorite coincidence, my best friend, my home. Will you marry me?" She was already crying too hard to answer. Instead, she nodded once, twice, then threw herself into his arms. He caught her instinctively. She laughed through happy tears. You idiot. I'd already said yes weeks ago. I know. I just wanted, he held her a little tighter, to give you a memory that belonged only to us. The cafe owner quietly wiped his glasses. The musicians resumed playing. Snow continued falling outside. Sophia finally looked up. You forgot something. What, the ring? He laughed. So I did. With slightly trembling fingers, he slipped it onto her hand. Perfect fit. She admired it for only a second, then immediately took his hand, placed the second ring on his finger. There, she smiled. Now we're even. As they prepared to leave, the elderly cafe owner stopped them. You know, when you first met here, I thought you'd never see each other again. He looked at their intertwined hands. I've owned this cafe for 35 years. I've watched thousands of couples. He smiled warmly. But the happiest ones are never the ones who find love the fastest. They're the ones who never stopped choosing each other. Sophia looked at Ethan. Ethan looked back at her. Neither said a word. They didn't need to because tomorrow they would become husband and wife. And this time, neither of them would arrive alone. The wedding day arrived beneath a clear winter sky. Fresh snow still rested on the branches outside the chapel. Everything looked peaceful, too peaceful. Ethan stood in the waiting room, staring at himself in the mirror. He had spoken in front of investors, negotiated million-dollar contracts, presented business strategies to global executives. Yet somehow, the idea of saying two simple words, I do, made his hands shake. A knock sounded at the door. Daniel stepped inside. You look nervous. I am. Daniel laughed. Good. Why is that good? Because if you weren't nervous, I'd question whether you understood how lucky you are. Ethan smiled. I already know. Daniel adjusted Ethan's tie. You know, 3 years ago, I thought I'd eventually marry Sophia. Ethan looked surprised. You did? Daniel shrugged. Our family certainly thought so. What about you? Daniel smiled. I always knew. Knew what? He looked toward the chapel doors. Whenever she talked about you, she smiled before she realized she was smiling. He patted Ethan's shoulder. You never had any competition. Across the hallway, Sophia stood in front of a full-length mirror. She wore a simple satin wedding gown, no extravagant diamonds, no heavy crown, only a tiny pair of pearl earrings. Exactly the way Ethan had once described his dream wedding. Simple, warm, just us. Mia carefully adjusted the veil. You know what? I've been your secretary for 6 years. Sophia smiled. I know. I've seen you sign billion-dollar contracts without blinking. I know, but today? Mia laughed. Your hands are shaking. Sophia looked down. They are worried. She smiled softly. No. Then why? Because she touched the wedding ring already resting on her finger. I've imagined today for 10 years. A tear quietly rolled down Mia's cheek. You really loved him for that long. Sophia laughed gently. I did. I was just a little slow at telling him. The chapel doors opened. Music filled the room. Every guest stood. Ethan looked up and forgot to breathe. Sophia walked toward him slowly. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows behind her. For a brief moment, she looked exactly like the girl from 10 years ago. The girl standing in a small cafe with no wallet. The girl who smiled shyly after a stranger bought her coffee. Only now she wasn't walking away. She was walking toward him. When she reached the altar, neither of them spoke. They simply smiled. The officiant chuckled. I'll give you two a moment. The guests laughed warmly. The ceremony began. The officiant looked at Ethan first. Do you, Ethan Hayes, promise to love Sophia in ordinary days and extraordinary ones for the rest of your life? Ethan didn't hesitate. I do. The officiant turned toward Sophia. And do you promise to love Ethan through every season for the rest of your life? Sophia looked directly into Ethan's eyes. I already have. The guests laughed softly. The officiant smiled. I'll accept that as a yes. She nodded. I do. Before exchanging rings, Ethan reached into his jacket. Sophia smiled. You have another surprise. I do. He unfolded a familiar piece of paper, the reservation confirmation from the blind date. He held it up. Do you remember this? She laughed through happy tears. I remember everything. He looked at the guests. Everyone thinks our story began because my blind date never arrived. He turned back towards Sophia, but that's not true. He gently folded the paper. It began because the right woman did. Sophia's eyes immediately filled with tears. He continued softly. I thought I went to that restaurant alone. I thought I'd been abandoned. I thought I was saying goodbye to the woman I'd loved in silence. He smiled. I was wrong. I never had a blind date. I had a future wife walking through the door carrying 2 wedding rings. Sophia laughed and cried at the same time. You finally figured it out. A little late, but I got there. They exchanged rings once more. Not because they needed new promises, because they wanted to remember them forever. The officiant raised his hands. By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. This time Ethan didn't hesitate. He cupped Sophia's face gently and kissed her. The applause seemed endless. Mia cried openly. Daniel whistled. Chairman Whitmore wiped his glasses twice before anyone could notice his tears. That evening, after every guest had gone home, Ethan and Sophia slipped away without security or photographers. They drove to the little cafe. It had already closed. The elderly owner was locking the front door when he saw them. He laughed. I wondered if you'd come. We had to. The old man unlocked the cafe again. No coffee tonight. He pointed toward the window. Just sit. They chose the exact same table where everything had begun. Snow drifted gently outside. The cafe was quiet, peaceful. Home. Sophia rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. So, if your blind date had actually arrived, he smiled. I would have been polite. And then I would have realized she wasn't the woman I was waiting for. Sophia looked up. When did you start waiting for me? He thought for a moment. I think the day you walked into that restaurant. She laughed. That's impossible. Why? You were expecting someone else. He kissed her forehead. No, I just didn't know. I was expecting you. Sophia intertwined her fingers with his. Outside, the first stars appeared above the snow-covered street. Inside the warm little cafe, 2 untouched cups of coffee slowly filled the room with their familiar aroma. Some people believe love begins with perfect timing. Theirs began with a missed blind date, a woman carrying 2 wedding rings, and 2 people who finally found the courage to stop pretending. This time, neither of them would ever arrive alone again. That's all for today. Remember to subscribe and support us.